everyone, welcome back to Making Stuff with Mrs. Barodi. I'm Mrs. Barodi, and the things we're making today is going to be a one-point perspective drawing. Those of you that have had me before, we've gone over a little bit about what perspective is, but for those of you that haven't had me or are like, I don't know what that is, perspective is just a way for us to represent a 3D object, a person, a chair, a car, on a 2D surface, like a piece of paper. And in order for us to do that, there's a couple other vocabulary words we're going to need to know and understand. So I have a little example here of what a one-point perspective, very basic, looks like. And you can see all these lines are going back towards a single point, and that point is on a line. This line here, when we're talking about perspective, is called the horizon line. It's where the sky and the ground meet. If I was going to do a still life, this might be where the wall and the table meet. And then the point on it is very cleverly called the vanishing point, because all the lines vanish to that point. And you can see I have nice, straight, crispy lines because I used a ruler. The things you're going to need for this project are a piece of paper, a pencil, could be a pen, a marker, whatever you have to draw with, and some kind of straight edge. It doesn't have to be a ruler. I'm going to use one because I have one. But if you don't, you could use a book, you could use a folder, anything that has a nice straight edge that's a little bit sturdy that you can draw along. Okay, so if you need to pause this now, go collect your stuff, go for it. Otherwise, we're going to get right into it, okay? All right, guys, so like I said, you're going to need a ruler or a straight edge, a pencil or something to write with. I always have a handy eraser, and then you're going to need a piece of paper. My piece of paper is a standard size drawing paper, so it is about 12 inches by 9 inches. Yours can be any size you want. Like I showed my example before, this is just a little, I think 4x6 or 5x7 card. And just another close-up look at that horizon line. That's going to be our first step, making a vanishing point, and then we're going to worry about our lines, okay? So step one, we are going to take our paper, and I'm going to make mine nice and vertical. That means it's a tall rectangle. I'm going to take my ruler or my straight edge, and I'm going to make a line towards the top of the paper. Not exactly at the top, not in the middle, towards the top. And here's a trick. If you have a ruler or something that has a nice corner on it, I like to take that edge and line it up with the edge of my paper, and that way I'll try and get this line a little bit straighter. So I'm going to lightly draw a line, and that's our horizon line. It goes all the way across the paper. Step two is I need to make a vanishing point. And for this, to make it simple, we want to put it in the middle-ish of that line. Now I have a ruler, so I can use that to measure the middle of my paper. So if my paper is 9 inches wide, then I need it to be 4 1/2. That's that line between the 4 and 5. That's half of my paper. So that should be the middle of the line. Now I'm going to make my vanishing point just a little bit bigger so we can see it, but you don't have to make yours that big. The next step is we are going to be drawing lines from the bottom of the paper towards that vanishing point. Now you can, if you don't have a ruler, just make some random tick marks at the bottom. But because I have a ruler, I'm going to measure it. And I want them to be equal-ish distance apart. So I don't have too many lines. I'm going to make mine 1 inch apart all the way across the bottom of my paper. I'm also going to draw lines from my corners, but I don't have to make a tick mark because I know where the corner is. So I make a little tick mark at 1, at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that means I have 8 tick marks across the bottom of my paper. It might be a little hard for you to see. So let me take my little black pen here and make them a little bit darker, just in case you couldn't see them before. Okay, so now I have my little tick marks along the bottom edge of my paper. I can keep my paper vertical. I can move it whatever way makes your heart happy. I'm going to leave mine vertical just to help us out. So I'm going to take my ruler, and this part is where things get a little tricky. I need to line up this edge of my ruler with the vanishing point and the first of my tick marks. Now, this is my writing hand, so I'm going to hold the ruler with my other hand. I'm going to hold it in the middle, and I'm going to press down nice and hard so that way it doesn't go anywhere. And another trick I like to use is I take my pencil tip and I put it on my vanishing point, and this becomes my anchor. The ruler can't go past that. It's stuck there. It has to stay there. So I put my pencil there, and I use that as an anchor, and then all I have to worry about is trying to line up that bottom tick mark down here. So now my ruler is lined up with the vanishing point and my first tick mark. And I take my pencil, and I've made my first line on my perspective drawing. And I'm going to keep doing that all the way across. So again, I'm taking my pencil, putting it there as like an anchor, so it can't go anywhere, and I'm moving the bottom one until it's lined up with that other tick mark. And I'm going to keep doing that all the way up. Now, maybe you want to use the tick mark as your anchor. Maybe that makes your heart a little happier. Go for it. Now, we're not going for perfect. Remember, we're going for ish. So all of my lines, are they perfect up here? Are they all not perfect? That's okay. This is just the first drawing. This is kind of like practice. This is where we sort of figure out all the kinks and the problems of our new technique. Now you're going to go a lot slower than me because this is maybe your first time doing this. I'm awesome. I've done this a lot, so I'm going to go faster than you. Please don't stress about it. So now I have some lines, and already it looks like, maybe it looks like a path or a road going back to that vanishing point. I'm going to take my ruler, and like I said, I'm going to take the corners of my paper and bring it back to that as well. So I'm lined up with my corner and my vanishing point. Don't rush. Take your time. There's no race. You want it to be nice and lined up before you make your line. I'm going to do it on the other corner. And you can see I'm using this hand. So I'm always using that side of the ruler. Going like this, turning myself into a pretzel, that doesn't make any sense. We want to line it up so it's comfortable and my pencil's on the same side of the ruler as the hand I'm using. So now this looks an awful lot like my example drawing, right? You can see on this one I used the edge and went up the edge of the paper as well. You could do that. You could leave it blank. If I was going to turn this into a path or a road, I might erase some of those lines. Now, if you want to be done with this, you think, I got it, coolio, feel free to wander away and practice. But if you want to give yourself a little bit more challenge and make it a little more interesting, you can turn your paper. I'm putting my horizon line on my left because I'm a righty. And I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to start making lines that go up my drawing. Now you have to be tricky and careful because this was one that I did that I messed up a little bit on. Let's move this out of the way. That's going to be difficult to see. So when we look at this, my lines that went across, you can tell they start getting closer and closer and closer as they get to that horizon line, but things are a little squiffy in here. So I'm going to do a little bit better. You can measure, so maybe you could do 2.5 inches, 2.25 inches, 2 inches, 1 3/4, and keep going down by 1/4 inch. Or you can just kind of guess. This was me guessing. So if we go back to our drawing, whoops-a-doodle, a little earthquake right there. So if I make my line here and I just put my ruler like this, does it look straight? Nope, it's a little bit crooked, and it's going to be hard for us to see with all these lines. So again, I'm going to take the edge of my ruler and line it up with the edge of my paper. Just like that. And now I'll have a nice straight line across my paper. Now, as I move this forward, I want it to be a little bit smaller every time I get closer to the horizon line. But if I start making it a lot smaller, we're going to have a mess up like my other one. So I'm going to use my ruler again, line it up with the edge, and make it just a little bit smaller. I'm just eyeballing it. I could measure it, but I don't want to. So again, does this make sense? I think it's a little bit too small. I think this is where we need to be. And you're going to keep doing that all the way up. You can see I'm being very careful in lining up the edge of my ruler with the edge of my paper. And I'm going to keep going. This always reminds me of the video game, or the movie Tron. Yes, it's a video game too. But it always reminds me of that movie, which you probably haven't seen because it's very old, even the newish one. Okay, and I'm going to keep making lines closer and closer and closer. Oh no, what's happening? Oh no, because I eyeballed it. It's not turning out right, is it? So let me show you one where it did turn out. This is my example with colors. So this is this, but a little bit better, right? So my lines that went across got smaller and smaller, but I measured and made them a little bit more even. And you can see everything is going back to that vanishing point. So this is kind of a final project for me because I colored it in. I could come back and add other colors, but I chose just to use green and white, and I used some pens, I used some Sharpie markers, I used some highlighters, whatever you got laying around. But as you get closer, see how teeny tiny those little squares are? It's going to get tough to color if you're using something big like a crayon or a regular marker. So just be careful if you're using markers or crayons or anything, just smaller tips for down there. So all of these lines are going back to that vanishing point, and I made it look like a checkerboard, which also helps my eye go back to that point. So some of the things that we need to remember when we're doing this, measuring is importante, because you can see this isn't going to make sense. Now I'm going to run out of room about there. So I could come back with my eraser and erase it and start over, or, because I don't like to waste paper, turn it over, erase some of the smudgy marks, do it again. So some examples of what to do and what not to do. Really work on measuring. Make sure that you're lining up your ruler or straight edge or whatever you have with that vanishing point and your little tick marks. So if you get this far, fantastic. This is an amazing way to go into the land of perspective, okay? But if you are feeling like you're not challenged, you're like, I already got this, Miss B. I think I understand this totally. You could be even trickier and make it even more interesting by now moving horizon line. This one's very close to the top of the paper. This one we moved down towards the bottom. And my vanishing point isn't in the middle. Now it's off to the side. So I was turning this into a road or a path. These could be the beginnings of telephone poles. They could be a fence. Could be anything. And then my house over here, I started with a square and a triangle. And then I took my ruler and lined those corners up and made those lines go back into the distance. You can see some of the pencil lines I haven't erased yet. So if you want to work on one-point perspective in a drawing and make it even more detailed and challenge yourself, then try moving that horizon line up or down. Try moving the vanishing point. This is 1-point perspective. Once you start adding another point, 2-point perspective, 3-point perspective, things get even trickier and trickier. And maybe we'll tackle that on a later video. Okay? So my challenge to you, my friends, is to just do a simple 1-point perspective drawing. Try out that horizon line, make that vanishing point, work on those ruler skills lining things up. But again, if you want to make it a little more challenging, add some color or add some more details to it. So until next time, I'm going to remind you to be safe, to be kind, and definitely to be creative. And I can't wait to see some of your drawings. Hopefully you are sending them my way. Okay, I'll see you next time.